Beautiful. Hello, everybody. There you go. You can finally hear me now. I have no Reese this week, but I'm here anyway, just to try and crack on with this one, I suppose. It's Abu Dhabi. It's round 10 of the PSGL Tier 4 Championship. F4 Championship, whichever way you are so inclined to go about enunciating this particular division. I think we have 16 or so drivers this evening for the Abu Dhabi, the Yas Marina circuit. Should be an interesting one, especially with the refigured configuration of the circuit as a whole. So I'm very excited for this one to get up and running. And why don't we, while we've got a minute, take a little quick look in a second at that track map. I think the session is just loading in now, so I don't want to do anything too soon to make sure that it all runs smoothly. Let's take a look at that track map. It is a bit of a different circuit layout to what we are used to here at Abu Dhabi. Of course, first introduced in 2021 with this track layout, and now has also seen an onslaught of controversies and different racing events, as we well know, from the 2021 season. Oh, that's your little track map guide thing. 16 corners along this circuit, and now we should be getting ready to get into the action at the very least for qualifying, which is short qualifying. 18 minutes of running, lots of action, lots of nonsense, hopefully, for everybody on track to at least get some good laps in. That will be the priority. So, let's crack on. Any second. Apparently still waiting on some players, but I'm not quite sure what that's all about. So there's the load. Let's take a look at what we've got. Of course, championship standing-wise, things are getting a little bit tight at the top of the field, but there was a little bit of a breakaway last time around. I'll just grab the standings for you. That's why it's going to stay in this screen for a minute. Won't be just a second. So the current standings sit as such. We have Milan Meyer clearly sitting atop the table, 12 points clear of everybody else. And then we have Thomas Gal, 12 points further back, and a further 4 points back, Thomas Laminen. So 12 to 16 to 17 points if you count Rishan. We currently have a 17-point championship at the top of things for the top 4 drivers. So that should be interesting to say the least. But of course, with only 2 rounds left this season, including this one and the next, I think we have 12 rounds overall. No, in fact, I lie. It's just this round, Abu Dhabi, and then we have next time out at the USA. I'm not sure whether that is Circuit of the Americas or Miami. The flag just says USA, so I haven't really had a chance to look at that just yet. But for the time being, I'll assume it's Circuit of the Americas, because that is a great track for league racing overall. Okay, so onto it then. This week, of course, we have Milan Meyer, we have Andre Molnar, we have Rishan, we have Istvan Nagy, we have Thomas Laminen, we have all the big players in play. Of course, we have Troy Parker as well. Had a great time last time out. I think, if my memory serves me correctly, got his debut victory in Australia. Raced a very intelligent and very, very well put together race. Very consistent, not many mistakes. Let's just do this quickly. Get the detail up, not telemetry. We want lap data, track map. Perfect. Let's get cracking. As the first driver across the line is going to be Thomas Laminen to start his first lap here of the Yas Marina circuit. The newly reprofiled, reconfigured and recoordinated Yas Marina circuit, of course. Let's see what he can put together in the Alfa Romeo. It's not been the best of most recent rounds for Laminen. He has had a few stumbling blocks here and there and not really scoring last time out. Had a bit of a dire one, which has seriously compromised his position at the top of the championship for the time being compared to Milan Meyer, who has interestingly just left the session, but hopefully he is able to reconnect. As Laminen needs to score some crucial points back this weekend. I've been re-invited to the lobby by Rishan. If anybody heard that little bloop noise, not sure particularly why, I am here. But yes, like I say, Laminen needs a good result this weekend, as do his other championship contenders. Milan Meyer, of course, with that 12 points in hand, is generally going to be looking a little bit more comfortable than the rest of the field. But for Laminen, he's got a lot to prove and a lot of very limited time to do it. Of course, needs to reduce that gap at the top of the field, which is going to be difficult with just this and one other race remaining in this 11-race calendar. So far, this lap has been good, but of course we have no frame of reference just yet, as Laminen will be the first driver to cross the line on a competitive lap. He will set the benchmark at a 23-1. Rounding that final corner now as well will be his teammate Miltos Karafilidis, who will go for a 23-2 to slot things in up there. I think Sven Schumacher is on a lap as well, but I think more quickly we need to be looking at Jane Tripkov, who has just crossed the line. Podium place finisher last time out, a really good result for him. And hopefully this time around can continue on that good run of form. It has been massively feast or famine for Jane Tripkov over the last few races. But we'll head back on with Mr. Schumacher, see what he's offering as Troy Parker lays down another benchmark, this time a 22-6, continuing his fine form from last time out in Australia. Sven Schumacher, who didn't have such a good time down under last time, hits a 22-8 for third place at present. Now, who else is on a lap? Nitro Shooter is just starting one of their laps. This is going to be... oh, never mind. I was going to say Troy Parker is going to be a contender for this session, but it seems that he's out already. I'm not sure whether he's crashed or Laminen is out as well. Is there a new session that I don't know about? All migrating host and people are leaving. Give me a second, folks. I will be back in just a minute. We'll head to a break and we'll be back just after this. Okay, folks, it appears that we are all now back in business by the looks of things. Apparently a session restart because the host had forgotten to put on Parc Ferme, which of course is never what you want to hear. But I think we should be getting back into some action now. Might explain why we weren't seeing, we were seeing some people crashing and whatnot. So, who's first out the pit lane? Would be... I think that's going to be Jane Tripkov, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it is. Jane Tripkov first out of the pit lane. It's a train of cars, actually. The Alfa Romeos are out in sequence together this time. And, of course, the Haas car of Jane Tripkov got a great result last time out in Australia. Looking to try and emulate that success here again. First car out on track. Not really an enviable position, to be honest. I wouldn't always want to be first car out on track, but here we are. Very high-speed circuit now, Abu Dhabi, as a result of the removal of that chicane complex in the first sector and a lot of the chicane complex in the third, I think it's the third sector really as well, with the banking into the banked, is it? It's slightly cambered at the end of the second sector, I suppose you would say. So it has ultimately increased the top speed of the circuit just a little bit. The lap times are much quicker than they used to be back in pre-2021. And as such, you kind of get a little bit of a better racing. Some people still prefer the old circuit configuration because it's more technical, and as such has a little bit more driver skill element to it. But I think it's undoubtedly better for racing that we have this hard braking zone where you can carry a bit more speed. The corner's quite wide. There are varying lines when the tyres start to get a bit more worn. I think there's plenty of scope for that to be considered a reasonable affair. Already taking bollards out, by the way, for Jane Tripkov. Hopefully none of those get actually touched underneath this car, because they can actually disturb the aero balance on this game, believe it or not. I know it's not quite as sophisticated as iRacing, but or anything like that, but it's still, bollards do actually disrupt the aero balance of the car, whether ever so slightly or negligibly or not. I don't even know if that's a word, we're just going there anyway. It still can affect it, and every millisecond of lap time is absolutely critical in a division as such as Formula 4, where things are so tight. Any real F1 esports division, to be honest, has this level of tightness across the board in it. It's never something that you want. You don't want to be having to drive at a disadvantage anywhere on the track, really. Whether you're carrying damage or whether you have a bollard stuck beneath your floor. Tripkov, obviously, we saw briefly what the target lap times are going to be on first runs. We'll see whether they get emulated here by Tripkov on the second time of asking. Previously running it in with a 22. This time he's going to be in 23.0. Followed up by Patrick Hadler, who brings in a 23.3, 23.2 from QKS. Now, who will be next across the line? I think Miltos Karafalitis, who blots it in P5. Still only P3 for Laminen, not really able to improve on what he did in the previous session. No worries there, though, as Troy Parker previously took out the lap at the top, and this time he is going to be just a tenth slower than he was previously with a 22.716. Tomas Gal also slots into the 22.7s with a 7.71. This is a reasonably close qualifying so far at the very top, but of course plenty more people still get to complete their laps, such as championship leader in the McLaren, Milan Meyer. Meyer currently just rounding into the third sector. Got this infield complex to go underneath the hotel. Very interesting area of track, and they've recently, I think, slightly widened this area too to allow you to carry a tad more speed. This final corner, complex, very, very quick. Quick braking as well. Very easy to take too much curb on the exit and on the entrance in order to compromise yourself. But still, Meyer does not do that. Meyer gets away with a 22.984, which slots him into 5th place, just ahead of Andrew Karapi by only 0.003 of a second. But it does put him considerably down on Tomas Gal and considerably down on Liam Stevens and Troy Parker, who have all slotted in through that 22.7 section. So just over 0.2 of a second Milan Meyer has to find on his subsequent runs. Now, Rishan out on track at the moment. One of the only drivers apart from Andre Molnar who is still on a hot lap. And that hot lap at the moment is not looking particularly troubling towards the top of the field, but we'll soon see as we come to the end of the second sector where he stands in terms of pace. It's purple according to the game, but we never take that for its absolute gospel on the map. It sometimes can be a little bit confusing and often just generally incorrect. We'll see what Rishan's able to produce, though, through the hotel complex, whether he's got anything to offer. It looks like carrying good minimum apex speed so far. Very fluid through there, right out onto the painted area at the right-hand side of the track. The Latifi spot, if you please, into the final corner, and Rishan will now run it to the line. It is going to be a 23-1. That's good enough for P9 for one of your championship hopefuls. Currently, it is he and Laminin who have taken the first hits, really, in this qualifying session and haven't really been able to find much out of it. Now, the only driver on a competitive lap at the moment is Istvan Nagy. Practically got the track to himself at this moment in time. Let's see what he can do. Plenty of space on track. Doesn't quite go as wide out there as Rishan did either. Whether that's just a difference in line or whether that's just not carrying enough speed, we'll soon see, as whether it's comparative in lap time. At the moment, not looking too untidy. Again, a little bit closer to what you'd consider to be regular track limits than what Rishan was. Usually that's an indication that the lap isn't particularly quick because they're not exploiting everything, and that would be exactly right. A 23-2, just a tenth behind our comparison to Rishan, but still doing his teammate in the championship, Milan Meyer, a great deal of favours there with qualifying. Puts him ahead of championship contenders Laminin, and I think just behind Rishan is also going to be quite helpful if it were to put the flag out now, and that would be where everybody ended up. It certainly gives him the opportunity to help him out in that aspect of holding up Rishan if he can get by him turn 1. Anyway, this should be people starting soon their next runs. Tripkov, if I'm not mistaken, is about to start his next run. This is the tail end of his in-lap, so don't get it confused that the outlap indicator has removed itself from the side of your screen. It is not. This is not a timed lap for Tripkov. This is just the end of his outlap, and he's coming straight back into the pits. Not quite sure why that would be. Maybe we can hop back on board with his teammate to see if a similar thing is being called in by the Haas garage. I don't think it will be, though. I think we'll see Sven Schumacher gearing up for a lap here. Starting to batten down the hatches and get a shift on. Here he goes. Onto the front straight, starting his lap. One of the only drivers on track right now to be doing a competitive lap time. We'll check in with Gal as well. Gal's just entering the third sector. I think not on a lap either. So no need to worry there. There is an Alpha Tauri pairing up ahead, but let's not worry too much about that. Let's head back on board with Sven Schumacher, who, for some reason, has had a spin of sorts. I'm guessing coming over the brow. Tyres not appropriately in the window, or maybe just pushing the front a little bit too much, and the rear gives up as a result. So that's Sven Schumacher's second run absolutely banjaxed. So no luck for him, I suppose. We'll hop on with Laminin. This is his second time lap that he's just on here. Entering into the start of the second sector, trying to get it very fluidly connected through that little chicane. He is being followed, of course, by Schumacher, who is just botched his lap, and then a little bit further down the road, Karafilitis, his teammate, is also making some steady headway. Only 0.03 of a second up on his previous best lap time at the moment. You have to hope that for Laminin, there is time in this final sector that he left out on track last time round. If not, then he is going to be putting himself in some dangerous, tricky waters as the rear steps out from Laminin in towards, I think that's turn 12. Difficult corner to try and negotiate the best of times, of course, turning while you're still on throttle ever so slightly, but that's not going to help his lap time at all. And we'll see what it's going to end up being when he crosses the line. I don't think it's going to be any way of an improvement. 2/10, of course, in that final sector, and you have to ask, how much more would there be if he hadn't had that rear kick out in that final sector? One would imagine that he might be pushing into the 22s, but still, that only leaves him 9th on present pace. Troy Parker now, of course, in the middle of his second run. That's quite the lap been posted there from Tomas Gal. The Hungarian has just slotted it on pole with a 5.95. Surely Troy Parker doesn't have anything quite up his sleeve that extravagant to respond to that, despite the fact that his second sector was looking quite rapid. We'll have to see where he's going to find himself at the end of this third sector, taking every inch of the track available to him. Now whipping it right on this two right-handers to finish the lap. Now powering it to the line, got to get it nicely hooked up. That curb can be slippery, and he does find more than Tomas Gal. A tenth more than Gal in that final sector. Pulls it through for a 22.474. That's a hard lap to beat, and there is quite the chasm back towards P3 now from these leading two. The front row is quite the gap back. Molnar, I think, currently just finished his lap of a 22.7, so we won't be having anything interesting coming from him. Mayer is just finishing his lap. Is it anything interesting? No, this is a 4-minute lap. Hopefully, oh no, maybe it wasn't. I don't know. It's confusing sometimes when you switch. Let's assume that this is his timed lap. We'll check at the end of the first sector. I think with that being a 4-minute lap, that includes the time he was in the pits and his out lap. So Mayer starting his time run now. It does look like he's hauling ass a little bit. So let's assume that this is the lap that he's looking for. He's 6/600, sorry, up at the end of the first sector. Of course, not really much of way of gaining time in the first sector. Really just one corner in which you can do it, which is the first corner. It does propel you through the rest of that first sector, though, so it is essential to nail. Now, the big time gain in the second sector is this chicane complex that connects these two DRS zones. Got that relatively nicely hooked up. It's all about the traction on the exit, though, because you come slightly over a brow, which unsettles the rear of the car, causing you to spin up a little bit sometimes, lose control of the rear. Let's see whether Mayer has found anything in that sector. It is purple according to the track map, but only 900ths faster. Now, the final sector is really where all the corners are in this lap. This is where the time is to be made. Very difficult braking zone in towards that corner there. Difficult, very easy to lock up because you're still rotating the car on your way in. No rear slide, but his teammate has found himself in the wars a little bit. But still, Mayer, undeterred, powers towards that finish line. What can he put down as a gauntlet for his fellow championship rivals to contend with? Only 800ths better. This time, an 8.98 leaves him in 8th place. Sleeper, who's just arrived at the top of the timing screens here, Bartosz Samaro, has just produced a 22.698 after having some howler starts in the last few races, getting taken out, retiring from races early, finishing at the back. It's not been a positive middle portion to the season for Bartosz Samaro, but he's looking to end season 32 strong. And so far, so good, with a very respectable 22.698 for Bartosz Samaro, ahead of Liam Stevens at present. That's a really competitive lap. Liam Stevens, I think, speaking of competitive laps, is on one of those as we speak. Again, making use of the track on the right-hand side. Not quite going as far out as we've seen some drivers do. Doesn't want to get caught in the trench on the two curbs, and now slides it in. A little bit of a power slide on exit. It'll be a 13,000th of a second improvement for Liam Stevens. So he improves in time, but not a place. This should be now everybody coming to the end of their second runs, if not starting their third. It seems that everybody is now diving back into the pit lane, so don't expect to see any drivers setting competitive lap times on track at the moment. One of the only drivers still out on track, of course, is Patrick Hadler, who sits at the back of the field at the moment with a 23.3, nearly a second behind the pole position time, which is not what you want to see from Hadler. He has had a few competitive races this season, and really has shown his craft and really shown his stall as well. His minerals have been laid out for all to bear, everyone to see. Hopefully he can get a little bit more out of this qualifying session on his final run, which I imagine he will be starting shortly. He's probably going to be entering the pit lane very, very soon. Nitro Shooter, what are we looking at for you? Okay, allegedly 0.04 of a second up, but now 0.9 of a second down. So let's not worry too much about what you're offering. Still a very respectable 6th place for the straight shooter. But everybody now should be entering that pit lane. We will see the final mad dash with about 3 minutes to go, I would think. As an Aston Martin, is that creeping out on track? That will be QKS. Starting his outlap very early. I'm guessing not wanting to get caught in any of the traffic that is inevitably about to come. QKS here He would ideally need a good result. Talking in the chat just before this session started about how he doesn't want to bottle it this week and how he's been bottling it a little bit in the previous week. So a good start to that resolution, I suppose you would say, for QKS would be to get a solid lap in here at the end of Q3. With him being the first driver out on track, he's not going to have full access to all of the track evolution that the rest of the field are going to have. But still, the other upswing, I suppose you would say, to him going out on track right now, ahead of everybody else, is that he isn't going to get caught in any of that traffic, which is now starting to spill out of the pit lane. We're going to start seeing people on their outlaps very, very shortly. And as such, the track is about to get very manic, very crowded, very clumped. And maybe, just maybe, QKS has got the right idea by starting this lap when he has. We'll stay on board with him because he's quite some way ahead of the rest of the field. But he is about to hit a litany of cars spewing out of the pit lane. Now, whether they get in his way or not is a different story. They need to be looking in their mirrors. This Haas ahead better be doing that, but it doesn't look as if he is. He's got very, very much in QKS's way there. And I think, as such, QKS would be well advised to just back out of this lap, to be honest, and save the tyres and try and go again. But whether the tyres are going to hold on that long is a little bit of a different story. That is the disadvantage that can come with going out that much earlier, as QKS did. Anyway, we're about to have, I think, Tomas Gal starting his final lap, as is Andrew Krapi, who has got quite a little bit of a jump on Tomas Gal for the time being. This lap for Karapi is going to be important. He's had a good few rounds as the American. It would be nice to see him emulating a couple more good results here again today. Maybe a points finish at the very least would be what I'd be expecting for Karapi. But at the moment, just 300ths, nearly 400ths of a second down on his previous best first sector. So not troubling anyone at the top of the timing screens for the moment. Of course, he's got his Red Bull teammate, Tomas Gal, currently sitting on the front row and just behind him on track at the moment too. Solid braking into this braking zone, misses the apex by a mere way, but manages to kill it back for a nice apex on the right-hander. Will it have compromised him, however, through the next portion of this lap? We'll soon find out. Where is he going to stand in terms of lap time compared to everyone else as well? Nearly a 10th down on his previous best as he exits Sector 2. Got a lot of work to do here in the final sector, does the American, to try and make something out of a bad situation. Of course, this lap has been far from perfect so far, but hopefully this final sector is where he can start harvesting some of that time back. And now, playing it very, very close on the curves, very, very close on the exit, and just making sure he's not close enough to the wall that it causes a problem. He's still pushing on, drifting a little bit wide, but still not too bad. It's going to be a marginal improvement for Karapi, but what is it going to be for Tomas Gal as he crosses the line? It's going to be a 10th improvement for the Hungarian. Again, though, not enough to dislodge Troy Parker's previous best lap, which was an absolute blinder. Troy Parker's best lap is still going to be the one that stands for him, because he crosses the line on an invalidated lap. So a 22.4 still the time to beat. Bartosz Samaro currently sits in P3. Had a really good qualifying session thus far. Can he top it off with a front row in the Alpine? Needs to now make this final corner count. It's not going to be enough, despite the fact that it is a 5.94. He manages to confirm his third place position, but it's not enough to slot himself onto that front row. Liam Stevens is now the next driver who might be able to trouble this one. QKS has had a Latifi incident with the wall there in turn 13. Now, or turn 14, sorry. Now, as Liam Stevens crosses the line, he too improves in time, but not a place. And Nitro Shooter improves in both, goes ahead of his teammate, dislodges him from that second row, and installs himself there instead. Karafalidis slots in on the third row alongside Stevens. Of course, that is now it for everybody who has crossed the line. Molnaire retires from session. Karapi, of course, already has crossed, and QKS has retired from the session. So you see your front row, Troy Parker, Tomas Gal, your second row, Bartosz Samaro, Nitro Shooter, and your championship protagonists. Well, they are all the way down the back of the grid, of course. That is going to be a tough pill to swallow for the likes of Milan Mayer, Thomas Laminen, Rishan, all of them having poor qualifying sessions, whereas the difference previously has been that really, Milan Mayer has done well in qualifying. Laminen and Roshan have been struggling, of course, undoubtedly so. But we've got a pretty good metric here from last week to see who's carried over that pace. It's safe to say that Tripkov has not. He resides in 11th. Mayer, no. Laminin had a horrible week last week. But the one man who seems to have done so, Troy Parker, on pole by 0.02 of a second. We'll hop to a break before the race starts. Enjoy the commercials. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for a word from our sponsors, GT Omega. But now it is time to get into round 10 of the PSGL Season 32. It is Abu Dhabi. It is the race. We've seen qualifying. We've seen how it's panned out. We saw a minor delay, of course, but now the race should not have too many of those. The weather looks fair, as it often does in the UAE. Never going to be too rainy here, is it? I've seen it happen maybe once in all of my years. Not sure what the hold-up is here. Here we go then. It is time for the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. It is 5 red lights. They're held for a while and we're off to the races with Troy Parker getting a decent getaway from P1 by the looks of things. He's not going to be contested into turn 1 by Tomas Gal, but instead Gal is going to be contested by Bartosz Samaro, it would seem. Everybody looks to be starting on the hard tyres, but we'll take a look at that tyre situation quickly. There's a few medium runners. Sven Schumacher opting for that strategy as he has done once before. Thomas Laminin, I think, also opting for that, but Laminin has just been mugged at the back of the field, now trying to take ground back on QKS. He's lost a lot of places off the start, and that is not what you want to see from one of your championship hopefuls. Bartosz Samaro now sits in the slipstream of Tomas Gal, who in turn sits in the slipstream of Troy Parker. There's a move being made by Samaro up the inside, but he's not going to have the inside for the next turn. Instead, that honour will go to Nitro Shooter, who's getting duffed up by Karafalidis, and now Liam Stevens, unfortunately, has lost out. He's had a spin or he's been touched or something, but he's all the way at the back of the field now. Unfortunately for him, he's going to have a lot of hard work to do to make his way up to the front once more. Anyway, looking back at the front, it is all change as Sven Schumacher has made up 2 places and is still looking feisty to make up some more as Jane Tripkov now has been forced off the road and taken around for a little quick spin. Delado, he's now 3 seconds back of the field and counting, but back up front once more. We'll let things settle down before we keep switching. QKS and Thomas Laminin, is he round again? Has he had another issue now? Has he been hit up by some other driver? It is not a good start for your championship hopefuls, but Istvan Nagy dives into the pit lane. just seemingly redundant of a front wing. Not sure what's happened there, but there is some action going down at the back of the field. But once again, it looks to me as if Troy Parker, with the telemetry, and he's not even using any battery. Last week, Parker's strategy was to leap away at the front using all the battery that he could before DRS became active. And when he did, he was able to leapfrog the field, consistently hold his opposition outside of that DRS window. And Troy Parker, again, displaying racecraft beyond his experience. And now towards the back of the field, here comes Schumacher up the inside. He's absolutely sent Karafalidis for a trip. Off to the shops you go, son. As now Schumacher manages to get past the Greek driver and sets his sights on the Mercedes in front. These medium tyres seem to be working well for him. About the only driver on the grid who they are working well for at the moment, because Laminen has been punted from pillar to post down at P14, and QKS also suffered a similar fate off the start. Either way, things starting to settle down a little bit here at the front. The fly, of course, in the ointment. Sven Schumacher on those yellow-banded medium Pirelli tyres. I don't think he'll be looking to stay behind Nitro Shooter for too long. Knows that he has a pace advantage, but Nitro Shooter doesn't look like he'll be staying behind Bartosz Samaro for too long, as Bartosz Samaro is very quickly losing touch to Tomas Gal ahead of him. That gap down to up to 9/10 of a second just before they cross the line there. Of course, now down to 8/10 with the DRS now being enabled and Slipstream and ERS all being used by Zamaro to try and keep that fight up. Schumacher is looking feisty here on these mediums. These mediums are going to make it work. And if not yet, then probably into the next braking zone. Simply because, never mind, he looks like he's going for it right away. Feels like he's got the advantage on traction, but he's going to have to try and get the switch back on Nitro Shooter, which is not going to happen here. Going to use all of that battery, of which he has very little remaining, as you could see. Now Nitro Shooter just deploys whatever he has and just sits pretty in front. Schumacher has used everything he's got to try and mount this attack on the Mercedes, and doesn't really have much left aside from his natural pace advantage through the tyres. And he's trying to make it work in the corners. On the straights, he's not going to have that luxury, and it seems that QKS has befall another similarly disgusting fate to what has happened to him at the start of the race. He's been round, but unfortunately not, well, fortunately for him, not any damage sustained by the looks of things. Schumacher still looking for a way by. And I think he's going to have to keep probing and prodding, because the drivers in front of him now seem relatively settled in their respective positions. That's never a particularly foreboding sign for those up front. Laminen on the mediums, setting the fastest lap of the race, desperately now trying to chase down Liam Stevens, who, as you remember, has had a bit of a tumultuous start to this race as well. The Schumacher is making his move up the inside of Shooter, has managed to make that move work, but now he has to defend from Shooter, who Shooter has a considerable amount more battery usage than he does. That is going to be the end of QKS's race again. Wanted a good result this week, said he wanted to stop bottling it, and Schumacher, speaking of bottling it, has just bottled it into the braking zone. Takes the Hamilton approach to that corner by just cutting across the sponsor boards. But even still, that's not what you wanted to see. Schumacher massively outbraking himself going into that chicane, and as such giving the advantage that he worked so hard for back to Nitro Shooter ahead. Now further down the field, we've got Andrew Karapi currently looking to rally up behind Miltos Karafalitis. This train is getting quite long now. It stretches from P1 all the way back down to Rishan in P12, who has not had a good start of things. Already 2 seconds behind this train, and will need to try and find some kind of way to get himself back into it. Arguably probably had another similar start to the rest of the guys who are lingering down the back of the field here, punted off or otherwise making mistakes that are going to afflict them later on, of course. Now, Liam Stevens has made a decent recovery so far. We'll check in with him and Thomas Laminen, who are both sitting in behind. They're both sitting in behind Milan Meyer, funnily enough, and with Laminen's position currently, he would be well suited to try and get ahead of Meyer and stop Meyer from scoring points. Every little helps, of course, as he is the closest championship rival, I think, apart from Tomas Gal, if I'm not mistaken, to Milan Meyer at the moment. Anyway, looking at this one, Liam Stevens trying to close up on the back of that McLaren. Of course, powered by the same engine in the car that he is also driving. Not that that matters in F1 esports settings, because all the engines are equal. It might matter when it comes to using the ERS percentages. What are we looking at for these two drivers? Well, 50% for Liam Stevens. For Milan Mayer, 56%. So not really too much to separate the two. So it will be whenever you want to use that ERS is probably going to prompt the other one to use it. So here for Stevens, I think he's going to try and prompt Milan Mayer to try and get up to the back of Andre Molnari. He's losing touch ever so slightly with every lap that ticks on by. Laminen will not want to be sitting behind these hard tyre runners whilst he's still got those medium boots on, because he wants to make those work while he's got them in the optimum window, which they are going to very quickly fade out of here, really. Wants to try and keep those primed for as long as he possibly can. Meanwhile, back at the front, we can see that Troy Parker leads the field still quite easily. Thomas Gal taking big lifts and coasts behind of Troy Parker at the moment. Not really seeing the point in making any moves. And holy moly, Troy Parker has not used any of his battery in order to command this race so far. Now, is this where Thomas Gal decides that he wants to make a move? He's gone up the inside. I think Troy Parker has just said, all right then, have it. I don't really mind. I'm quite happy to let you burn your battery now, which I have been holding on to for the entirety of this race so far. Go ahead, Gal. See what you've got at the front of this field. Gal really has been the one to sit in second place for a lot of these races so far this season, but has had a win of his own. And is now looking to add to that tally too. Sensational driver in his own right, and now looks to be trying to get the speed boost away from Troy Parker and gap the field just as Parker did last week in Australia. The Gal here, I don't think he knows about Parker's secret weapon, which is the 98% charged battery that he is sporting at the moment. Has almost double the battery charge that Thomas Gal does, and that says something when he's on 50%. So, this is hotting up to be a little bit of a mind game battle at the front of this field for the time being. Troy Parker more than happy to sit behind for now, and it seems that so are the rest of the field, as we actually are seeing a move. It's Sven Schumacher once again muscling his way past Nitro Shooter. I'm not sure what happened there. Did Sven Schumacher end up taking out Nitro Schumacher? We'll have to try and find a view of it later on when people have submitted clips, but for that, it looked pretty poor, whatever it was, as Miltos Karafalidis is now deciding it's time to try and take the fight to Schumacher. Schumacher has been taken. Whatever happened there, he's suffering for it. And now, with no battery, of course, Miltos Karafalidis has seen his opportunity. He's pounced as those medium tyres have started to taper off a little bit. And now Karafalidis sets his sights on Bartosz Samaro. He won't have DRS at present, but of course, if he puts his foot down a little bit, he should be able to drive up to the rear of Zamaro with relatively few issues. So as this 11-car snake brings itself around for the 8th time, see if any positions get chopped and changed. I think all the gaps, are just a little bit too far apart. Unless there's a Mr. Laminen who's making a few inroads on towards Liam Stevens. He pulls out alongside the Mercedes on those medium tyres, of course. Tries to get the cutback now onto the next straight, but Stevens has positioned his car very, very nicely. Laminen now dumping the battery here, of which he does not have much to play with to begin with. Stevens goes defensive, and Stevens holds the position for now. Not going to be able to get around Liam Stevens at the moment. The Finn having a frustrating race down here outside of the points. Milan Mayer basically got a roadblock in behind him to stop him from losing points out to Laminen. And these medium tyres are becoming less and less relevant with every lap that goes by. Laminen, I think, realises that the best time for him in this race is behind him, and he's going to have to try and salvage whatever it is that he can from this. A safety car or something, a stroke of luck. We've seen stranger things happen, of course, in Abu Dhabi. Back at the front of the field, Troy Parker has been troubled ever so slightly and uses some more of his battery, but I think that is because Thomas Gal has been giving his a little bit more stick. We're seeing battery usage here from Troy Parker. Not something that we've seen so far this race, but clearly something now that he's felt he's held on to for long enough and is comfortable using just to ensure that he stays in touch with Thomas Gal. And speaking of Red Bull drivers making moves, Andrew Karapi, after a pretty poor qualifying, I think finishing down in 8th, has managed to pull his way up to 5th place at the moment and is now taking Sven Schumacher. I think this is where we're going to start to see Schumacher under a little bit of pressure. Those medium tyres are going to start to feel not quite as good as they used to. And on top of that, he has been really low on ERS for pretty much the entirety of this race thus far. So Karapi exploiting both of those weaknesses at present and slotting himself into a point scoring or higher point scoring position in 5th place. That will be a nice haul of points for the American to keep that good run of consistent scoring going. Meanwhile, Karapi has to now hunt down Karafalidis, who in his own right is having a very, very good race of things here. 3-second time penalty for Roshan. Not what you want to see for him. He has had a couple of those last week, if I recall. And as such, this time, it's not going to help his situation too much either, as he is 4.6 seconds behind Laminin. And that means that he is then a further 1.5 seconds behind the point-scoring positions, I would imagine. And with that 3-second penalty applied, I think it's pretty certain that we can now write out Roshan, not only from this race, but also from this championship. He is 17 points down to Milan Mayer as it stands. And I think after this race, we'll be pretty much mathematically out of the championship fight. Istvan Nagy, another driver who we saw picking up a litany of penalties on track limits last time out in Australia. Of course, a very easy track to do that on, but I think he totaled about 12 to 15 seconds of penalties last time through. Sven Schumacher losing another position there if he didn't catch it at the back of his shot. That was to Andre Molnar, who is returning this week. He's managed to put himself into P6, another consistent result for the Hungarian. So far, so good then. Sven Schumacher and the medium tyres all starting to struggle. We saw it with Laminen. We've seen it with QKS at the start of the race, and now the only other driver on that tyre, Sven Schumacher, also feeling the pain. He's now back in contention with Nitro Shooter, who, whatever their incident was before, ended up resulting in Nitro Shooter falling down into 8th place. I'm sure that Shooter would very much like to get that position back, as it seems that Schumacher has made a meal of turn 2 and is now looking to get pounced on here by Nitro Shooter into the hairpin. It is a beautiful move. It's up the inside. He's held it tight, and Sven Schumacher ultimately has no rebuttal for Shooter. Now, will DRS be activated here for Shooter? I believe it will be, as he just about had it going into the detection zone on Molnar. But not to worry, it's not activated, as a matter of fact, for Schumacher. So that makes matters worse, as now Schumacher is coming under threat from Milan Mayer. He should have it this time around, but even still, Mayer smells blood in the water and doesn't want to wait any longer before trying to gain another position. He's a little bit too far back here to make a move, but he will try and close that gap up with the ERS usage. And he sees that those medium tyres on the Haas ahead are struggling. So Schumacher here is caught between a bit of a rock and a hard place. Losing positions with every lap that goes by, really. We are now on lap 12 as we will cross the start-finish line with Thomas Gal. Now, I believe that is Thomas Launen, by the way, diving into the pit lane. Managed to make those mediums last just 12 laps before he now goes and commits onto the harder compound tyre. That is not what you want to see for Laminen. Of course, everybody now at the end of the race will be on a faster tyre compound than he will be. And the hard tyre at this moment in time doesn't really have as much of a great tyre delta that you'll be making up a great deal of time, really. So This is pretty much going to hammer a nail into the coffin of Thomas Lamanen's race hopes. I'm not sure whether they totally nail in his championship hopes just yet, because he was a close contender. But irrespective of that, it is going to be a nice little scuffle here with Milan Mayer and Sven Schumacher. Surely he's close enough this time around. Sven Schumacher doesn't have any ERS to speak of, and it seems that Milan Mayer does, but it isn't, again, not going to be enough to get by Schumacher on this occasion. I think we're going to start to see things peter out a little bit here. Will Schumacher elect to dive into the pits this time around? One would imagine that if Lamanen has dove in just the lap before, we might be expecting to see the other medium runner around the field dive in maybe this lap, if not the next. So he made it 13 laps on these medium tyres. Is it going to be time to go and finish them off? It absolutely is for Sven Schumacher, which will mean that Milan Mayer inherits 8th position and means that he can now get to work on trying to score some more points behind the other Mercedes of Nitro Shooter. Liam Stevens hasn't really been able to mount much more of an attack on Mayer since the last time we saw him go for it. And it seems that it's not going to be any better this time around. The only thing for Mayer here is he needs to ensure that he is in the DRS detection window, which it's tight as to whether he was when he went over that detection line just there on the entrance into the corner. We'll soon find out. He did just about get it. The tick over managed to just get it by, I think, about 0.02 of a second. So that'll be a lifesaver here for Mayer. It'll mean that, hopefully speaking, he will be able to get DRS on both these straights. But at the moment, I think he may have just lost it because he wasn't quite close enough, and he does not have DRS now on this second straight, which means that Liam Stevens might be looking for a bit of an assault. Mayer goes defensive and holds position for now, but that doesn't mean that Stevens does not smell potentially an opportunity on the horizon. It smells like promotion up in here for Liam Stevens, as he's now looking to hunt down Mayer and cause a few spanners to be thrown into the McLaren machine at the moment. Missing apexes there, Mayer, as well. Maybe feeling the heat just a tad. But you know what they say, if you can't take the heat, then you need to get out of the kitchen. And at the moment, Mayer is very much trapped in a Mercedes sandwich that's being cooked on up. Not quite a toasty just yet, but it could get that way if Liam Stevens is able to find a way to fight with Milan Mayer. Patrick Hadler is now coming into the pit lane. Whether that is for retirement or a pit stop, we'll soon find out, because he hasn't really had the best of races, unfortunately, for Hadler. Stevens just doesn't quite seem to have the same pace that Milan Mayer does through the corners here, which is disappointing, to say the least. Tripkov, or Schumacher came into the pits again here, or has he just exited out ahead of Lamanen? I think that probably is the case, yeah. Misreading the track map there, sorry folks. But at the front of the field, nothing is moving now. Since Schumacher started plummeting on down, nobody is really making any moves. They'll always be sitting in this train for a little while, so we can head back to the front of the field where we see Tomas Gal under a bit of pressure. We'll check in on those ERS percentages. It's 36% for Gal at the moment. Meanwhile, well, that's a nice number to see, isn't it? 100% for Troy Parker. The German being ruthlessly efficient with his ERS deployment over the course of this race. So we'll take a look at the battery in a few laps' time, maybe when they come out of the pit lane to see who's using what. But for the moment, has Bartosz Samaro just made an error? I think he has, because he's just been mugged by a number of drivers coming onto the second straight. This is the first straight, if I'm not mistaken. He's made an error of sorts there. He's gone down to 7th place. That's promoted Karafalidis into a podium position, but it's also removed the DRS potential for Karafalidis here. So things might get a little bit spicy with Andrew Karapi in the sister Red Bull, heading up behind the Greek driver who has no DRS. He's going to see this. Is he going to look to try and make a move? He's in the wheel tracks, but he's not really gaining enough here. The DRS just simply not effective enough for Karapi on this occasion. Maybe if he can hold tight with Karafalidis, but Karafalidis is pushing on now. Try and get back inside of that DRS window of the drivers in front, the podium, the front two currently. Wow, fifth gear through there. Impressive. As Sven Schumacher and Laminen are fighting at the back of the field at the moment on those hard tyres, and they are making up time on everybody else, but unfortunately I'm just not sure whether it's going to be enough as we see our first round of stops coming in from Molnar and Zamaro. Both of them have dove into the pits. I'm intrigued to see whether this is going to be a wing change or anything. No, it's just tyres. It's time to go onto the mediums now with 13 laps to go. I suppose if you were ever going to pull the trigger, it would be around this time. So expect to see the pit stops in this lap or the next for all these hard runners. Ultimately, the ones that could dictate the way this race ends up panning out. And once again, Karafalidis does not have DRS here. He is going to be under pressure, surely, from Andrew Karapi on this second DRS straight. There's no way that Karafalidis is going to have DRS for the second time of asking here. So Karapi, I don't think he's going to have enough of it because he's just gone and lost a tenth out of that corner. I don't think he's going to have enough straight line speed to gain all that time and try and slot one past Karafalidis before the pit stop phase. So as it stands, the Greek will hold station in third place. And now that will allow the gap up front with Troy Parker and Tomas Gal to only extend further. Parker has elected to use a little bit of battery compared to what he has been previously. I'm guessing just to make sure he stays right on the gearbox of Gal through the pit stops. Simply put, because you can gain a little bit of ERS in the pit lane. Now, Gal dives into the pit lane. So does Karafalidis. Everybody is dummying whether they are going in. Parker now will surely look to deploy all of this battery, or at least a lot of this battery, to try and get a little bit of an overcut here on his race rival in Tomas Gal. They've been pretty much glued together for the entirety of this race. Troy Parker is going to make the stand and dive through this lap with that battery on, pretty much. We'll take it on board to see just how much ERS he is going to be using. We'll even pull up the telemetry data just to show you how much ERS he's going to be using. Maybe this was his strategy the whole time, but he is using an awful lot of that battery here. He's gone from 85% to 45% in just a few sectors. A bit of rubber banding there made me wonder if he was all alright on the braking into that corner, but it seems okay for now. ERS deployed once again, the overtake button being pressed. He's putting time into Karapi quite considerably on this lap. But is it going to be enough to put time into Tomas Gal, who ultimately will have those medium tyres warmed up, ready and raring to go this time around when Parker comes into the pit lane? This is what you got to worry about. This is why the overcut is so difficult to pull off on F1 22. The tyre warm-up phase is so very difficult to try and make up time through. And he's not even going to go in this time. He's racing his own race, Parker. He's just doing his own thing. Going for 2 laps over that of Gal. Not covering off the undercut in any way whatsoever as Karapi and Shooter now dive into the pit lane. I believe that will mean that it is going to be Parker and Tripkov, the only 2 drivers who are yet to get off these hard tyres. A bold strategy from the German. We'll see whether it pays off for him. At the moment, burning all of that battery down, you've got to think he might want something left to play with when it comes to putting these medium tyres on towards the end of the race. So as the battery falls out of his grasp, Tomas Gal has Andre Molnar for company, and also will very soon, if he continues on at this pace, have Jane Tripkov for company too to hold him up. The whole field squabbling in behind. Milan Mayer is currently side by side with Thomas Laminen. Laminen's little ploy onto the hard tyres has gained him positions initially, but you got to think that the hard tyres compared to the mediums now are going to be far from ideal, and the big loser in all of this, unfortunately for him, has been Bartosz Samaro. That mistake that he made has just relegated him out of contention for this. He's now caught at the very back of this train. Mayer, of course, gets past Laminen here, but it's all change. It's all chaos. It's all carnage. They're going abreast into the corner at the end of the second sector. There's still 2, in some cases 3 wide. Snaps of oversteer happening for some drivers. Milan Mayer desperately looking for a way by as Shooter slots it up the inside. Everybody trying to make sure they get it stopped and not plow into the back of each other. Guys, this is not helping yourselves. You are allowing everybody to get away as Troy Parker makes his pit stop. We'll see where he comes out in relation to Gal. Of course, Gal has had a lot of time to get these medium tyres warmed up now. Has it been the right call for the German as the Hungarian now very quickly makes his way past? I think this has been a bad call for the German. We'll see where he ends up coming out. Laminin has a 3-second time penalty. That's going to make his situation much, much worse as Tripkov, of course, leads the field. Andre Molnar has even got ahead of his teammate in Troy Parker with those medium tyres now. Parker will need to find a way by stat because Tomas Gal is going to get away. He's going to try and get past Jane Tripkov, who is going to really not defend this. He's not on the same strategy as these guys. He has no reason to do so. As Molnar goes defensive, Tomas Gal benefits only from Troy Parker having to be made to work for it by by Molnar, as now Tripkov has been dispatched. Of course, that gives DRS over to Molnar, so Parker can't make a move. It's going to be round the outside again. He can't make that work. Oh boy, is Molnar making this difficult for his teammate. Of course, there are no team orders in PSGL, and the teammate system doesn't really matter. You are ultimately driving for yourself. There's no points for constructors at the end of the day. This is giving the race to Tomas Gal on a silver platter at the moment. Troy Parker is being held up so unbelievably much. These hard tyres for Jane Tripkov are just getting in everybody's way. Tried to get out of the way to get into the pit lane there, but it nearly ended up making a meal of it for Andre Molnar, and they lose yet more time to Tomas Gal at the front of the field. This is not good. And that is Jane Tripkov, of course, pitting, and now that's Troy Parker having an off-track excursion. That's a further second down now that he was not being before. This strategy has not paid off. It was looking to be a really comfortable victory for Troy Parker if he'd have just responded when Tomas Gal went into the pit lane. Troy Parker desperately needs to get back inside that DRS now. It's his only chance of making up some time. Don't get flustered, Troy. That's all the advice that I can offer you. You've just got to try and stay calm here. Keep it cool, keep it keen. Miltos Karafalidis, of course, now joins the party with Troy Parker's mistake. But Troy Parker has the pace. He proved in his initial stint that he has the pace to see this one out without any ERS. I don't know whether he has the pace to make up 1.4 seconds without any ERS, but he's also still going to have to try and find a way past Andre Molnar, which may be easier now that Molnar doesn't have DRS. But Molnar played the team game for the Red Bull car. Of course, both part of that ET8 group rather than Shizou, which Troy Parker is a part of. So maybe that team play is coming into effect rather than the Alpha Tauri Brotherhood. Either way, we're about to see another run it back here as Troy Parker has evaporated that gap to Andre Molnar. And is now looking to go for another bite at the cherry. Trying to restore as much battery as he can. Should have a pretty easy run of things here with the DRS. Whether he wants to try and get by this time or will wait until the second DRS straight, which would be my recommendation, simply because then you have no opportunity for Molnar to come back by you. He's right in the wheel tracks. He's ready and raring to go. Great exit from Parker. He's now going to try and light it up around the outside. He will have Molnar dispatched long before the braking zone. Molnar is gone and in his mirrors now. Troy Parker can get down to business. He has to show us all of the pace that he has. He needs to do about 8 qualifying laps in a row here, as they used to say to Michael Schumacher. Gal is no opponent to be snuffed at. He is a formidable adversary. We're going to have to see some cracking laps from Parker to make this one all the way back up. He's already dropping Molnar 6-7 tenths of a second. Molnar just doesn't have the same source that Parker does here. Parker has been one of those front two drivers for the entirety of this race so far, and he now needs to show that again in as many spades as he can. Molnar, of course, still losing time, but going to gain it all back under the DRS, as Troy Parker is throwing everything at this, really attacking these corners. Purple Sector 1, if it's to be believed. Of course, no ERS to speak of particularly, just hovering above that 10% mark, as you can tell by his red flashing light. There will be DRS as well for Andre Molnar, so that makes things just that little bit more difficult should Molnar try and come back at Parker. But the traction is where I'm seeing Parker really making the inroads. At least on his overtake against Molnar last time around, that's what did it for him. This time around, though, Molnar is not being dropped quite so easily. Still going to be ahead by the time it comes to the braking zone, so that should be all fine for Parker, but he's not making the inroads that he would like to into Tomas Gal. Of course, has the pace through this third sector, though, so we'll see what's able to be mustered up by him here. Troy Parker, oh my goodness, head and shoulders, spades of time being made up. That was 1.8 going into that sector. It's now 1.2. Fastest lap of the race from Troy Parker. Nitro Shooter responsible of his own as well up in P4. He's now hunting down Andre Molnar for his maiden podium in this division. Nitro Shooter could be on for something here as well. Troy Parker could very much be on for something here too. Rapid lap times coming out from the German. Tomas Gal has got to be thinking, what is going on behind me here? I too have no battery, but do I have the pace to respond? Or do I just have to try and use my head, use my gall, my racecraft and experience to let this guy go by and then take him back using the DRS at a later point? For the time being, Nitro Shooter is looking like he might be trying to get feisty with a move here. Let's see what he's got left in the tank. Everybody has pretty much deployed all of their battery reserves by this point in the race, but the DRS surely will be the one to help Nitro Shooter here. Molnar forces him to the outside. He's not significantly alongside. Molnar outbreaks him, but it's a switchback up the inside. What a move this could be if Shooter is able to pull it off. Unfortunately, just doesn't have the traction to make that one work safely up the inside. And as such, Molnar will hold position. But interestingly, back at the front, the battle for the lead is spicing up as Parker now has that DRS back in his back pocket. He's acquired underneath that 1 second range. And now we'll see whether he's got the gall, got the minerals to pass Gall up the front. Sven Schumacher gets a 3-second time penalty, which just brings his race from bad to worse. Now 3 seconds from the back of the field. Laminen also in a similar position. They're not having a fun time whatsoever really here. Milan Mayer, an understated 6th place performance at the moment. That will only do well for his championship hopefuls. Anyway, this is where we're going to start to see that gap evaporate here for Troy Parker. He's got the DRS now. Will be able to make up some time on Tomas Gal. Some free time as well. Some time that he doesn't have to work really, really hard for. He has been working hard. He's been working those tyres hard through that final sector. He's got 2 laps of fresh rubber on those tyres compared to Tomas Gal, who is trying to use everything he can to stay ahead. Oh, and that is going to be a safety car because Bartosz Samaro, a VSC at the very least, Bartosz Samaro has had an incident at turn 2, I believe. Lost the rear of the car. Maybe lost his front wing too. And as such, that's going to neutralize the race. The VSC, or is it a safety car? It's a full safety car. The safety car is coming out, ladies and gentlemen. If you didn't have a spicier end to the race, this would be it. It's not going to be out for very long, I'll tell you that much. But the question now is, do people pit? It's going to be a fake. It's not going to happen for Tomas Gal. It's not going to happen for Troy Parker. He tried to bait Gal into thinking he was going in. Nobody so far is blinking on the pits. Nobody's taking the risk. I mean, to be honest, if I'm Thomas Laminen or Sven Schumacher, absolutely take that risk. What have you got to lose at this point in the race? Hadler does the same. Rishan does the same. Tripkov maybe going to dive into. Why not? I think he is. Tomorrow, of course, will once his car limps back to the pit lane with that missing front wing. But they're going to strap on those red-walled soft tyres. They're going to give it their best shot. Try and get something out of this. Of course, they will come right back into point-scoring positions because nobody behind them has diverted from their strategy. And they're now going to be in a prime position on the best tyres to try and make some moves. I don't think it will be enough to get up to the back of the likes of Troy Parker and Tomas Gal. But it certainly may be enough to improve your point-scoring positions on the likes of Milan Mayer. and Miltos Karafalidis. So we can take a breather for a minute. Whilst the safety car weaves its way around the track, the drivers behind try and keep their tyres warm. So no news on the safety car coming in just yet. I think it should be out for at least another lap. I think the game will automatically bring it in with 3 laps to go. So we have at least 3 laps of racing. Whilst frantically weaving to keep their tyres up to temperature. It's going to be so important to have tyre temp in this game off the restart. You don't want to spend all of that time just working your tyres to not have anything in it, especially the rear temperature with how the game limits your rear tyre spin up when the safety car is coming in the 3rd sector. You can often lose a lot of temperature with that. I'm not sure why the game does that. I'm not sure if there's a way around it, but either way, it is exceptionally annoying and often extremely difficult to keep temperature in your tyres in those moments. As it is, Troy Parker not making much of an effort to do that right now, but I think everybody will be pretty much on 100% battery. So this will be an absolutely manic sprint. What can you do? I think if you're Sven Schumacher and Laminen and Roshan, all with your penalties and on the soft tyres, you're looking at cause carnage. You're looking at open up some space, and the safety car will be in this lap. We're not going to have any PTSD with the lapped cars being allowed to overtake the safety car, but only a certain lap cars. Doesn't matter. So as the safety car will come in, you will see the field warming their tyres frantically, trying to get the heat in before Tomas Gal gets ready to pull the pin. Big slide out of Karafalidis, but that's not going to be it because now we're off. Gal has gone. He's bolted, trying to get a good getaway. 1 over Troy Parker. At the moment, though, it's seemingly just spread it out a little bit. 4 tenths between the pair of them and 3 tenths further back. It's now going to be a bit of a run as Parker seems to have those rears lit up beautifully, or at the very least, just doesn't have them for Andre Molnar. He's just fallen back straight into the clutches of Nitro behind him, and it's only going to get worse as he has to defend his position a little bit further back. Meanwhile, up front, Troy Parker looking dangerous. So is Sven Schumacher. He's making moves up the field. It's carnage with all these soft tyre runners towards the back. No one, however, going off track or having any incidents just yet. Liam Stevens, the first victim of this Haas car. Meanwhile, up the front, Nitro Shooter alongside Andre Molnar. Not quite making the move just yet, but we'll look for it this time around on the switchback onto the second DRS straight. No DRS, of course, for 2 laps after the safety car has come on in, so we may not yet see it until the end of the race. Liam Stevens is going to be the victim here as he's going to get surely outplayed by these soft tyre runners. Around the outside, Nitro Shooter is made to go. Unfortunately, trying to make it stick back on the inside switchback. We've seen this one before. Didn't have the grip to make it work then. Didn't have to make the grip to make it work now. He'll hold position just behind as Sven Schumacher is looking again, try and get racy this time behind Andrew Karapi. Thomas Laminen has also passed Liam Stevens in all of this kerfuffle. Troy Parker and Tomas Gal have left Andre Molnar for dead at the front of the field too. 1.4 seconds between those two and the rest of the field behind. They're in a league of their own today. Let's leave them to it for the time being. Meanwhile, these soft runners frantically trying to find a way by. Andrew Karapi doing everything he can to try and prevent that from happening. It's absolute pandemonium at the back of the field here and they're still trying to find ways by. It's surely going to be a braking maneuver into the hairpin. You've got to imagine it will be. The soft tyres onto the worn tyres. Where have we seen this one before? Up the inside goes Schumacher. Milan Mayer next in his tracks. In fact, it is going to be a disaster for Karafalidis. He has been rounded by somebody, and now Sven Schumacher will try and inherit the earth as he gets up to 5th place potentially, up on the inside of Milan Mayer, up into the chicane. It's up the inside, it's cleanly passed, and now he too looks to try and throw a spanner in the works of these podium positions. He's making monstrous progress on these soft tyres and only has a lap left to make some more. Make hay while the sun shines, and he is certainly doing that, living by that adage, as now Andrew Karapi is being taken up the inside by Thomas Laminen. Milan Mayer is not going to like seeing Laminen behind him, but what he will like is the 3-second penalty that he currently has. Whether that gets removed or not by the stewards is a different story, but the real story is about to unfold here as we enter the final lap momentarily. Tomaskal and Troy Parker separated by 0.2 of a second at the front of the field. We will follow them to the line. We will keep the progress up, and that is the worst thing that Tomaskal could have hoped to have seen. DRS has been enabled. Troy Parker has all of the cards in his hand. He has the battery. He has the DRS. He has everything to play with here. The medium tyres that are 2 laps fresher than Tomaskal's. He has all of the cards. He has raced a brilliant race. He's come back from misfortune. He's come back from missed tyre strategy. And he now has the opportunity to win back-to-back here. It is Tomaskal who will try and deny him in the Red Bull. It is a Red Bull sister team fight at the front as he dives to the outside. It'll be defended by Tomaskal. Troy Parker gets moved off the track. Oh dear, has he lost enough time to go and try and fight back now along the back straight? The slipstream, the DRS, the ERS, it's all active. He's diving it down the outside. Tomaskal offers a tight defense, but round the outside he tries and makes it work. It's going to go the long way round. It flips back to the right hand side momentarily, and Troy Parker's got the move done. Very close to an off-track excursion. It's not done yet. Tomaskal tries to slot it up the inside, but it's not going to be quite close enough. Surely there's no more overtaking opportunities now for Tomaskal to try and find an opportunity, try and find a way by. He's too far back. Troy Parker has won the race. It has been a valiant effort from Tomaskal, who held the lead for a long time, but Parker wins from Gal. Nitro Shooter debut podium in 3rd. Andre Molnar slots into 4th. Karapi in 5th. Mayer in 6th. Stevens followed by Tripkov and Schumacher. The soft tyres looked great, but the 3-second penalty was just too much to overcome. And that is one hell of a way to end an Abu Dhabi race. You love to see it. It is always a provider in the late laps or the late safety car. It is PTSD, of course, for everybody who's a long-term F1 fan. But that one, I can assure you, had no handling from Michael Massey. It was all Bartosz Samaro inflicted, and as such, it results in another race win for Troy Parker, who gets it done on the final lap. A great race, some great driving, some great strategy, and in the end, the German reigns supreme over the Hungarian, who slots onto the podium but doesn't take fastest lap. That goes to Nitro Shooter in the end with a 25.5. Beautiful race, beautiful laps. Well played by everybody. It was clean on the most part. There were a few questionable moves, but either way, it was really fun. That's it for this week. Join us next week as we head to the USA for the Circuit of the Americas season finale for PSGL season 32. I've been Buffers, I've been George Bray, whichever way you want to call me. I'll see you next time.
This broadcast was brought to you by GT Omega, proudly supporting PSGL.